let's move back. Let's become a little bit less reflective, and a little bit less theoretical, and a little bit more substantive about the, we were talking about like the sort of the folly of trying to recap the decade. But I think actually we did a pretty good job of that, to be honest with you. I wouldn't want to recap this year, because that's like you'd actually have to go through, like, there's no way for me to get a sense of the, sort of like the broad strokes of this year at this point. I feel like I'm about to pass out. And even this week seems sort of more than I could digest. But there are two big stories this week, it seems to me, or really one big story. But in the debate, I think was also, we've had a turning point in the race, in the Democratic race, I think is also the case. The big story this week is Nancy Pelosi holding back these articles of impeachment, because as far as I can tell, it is the first sort of like proactive, aggressive move, power move by the Democrats that I can remember in a long time. And let me just sort of qualify this by saying, meanwhile, the legislation that was passed this week, I think, is largely garbage and has not gotten the scrutiny that it deserves. But I think there's a certain inevitability to this type of thing in this era. But I'm trying to stay positive and see that the exercise of power by the Democrats, and I'm just convinced that this generation of Democrats that's in charge right now is never going to get us to where we need to get from a sort of policy standpoint. But at least the idea of like, this is what it feels like when Democrats exercise some type of power, and it's not a huge power, but withholding those articles of impeachment is like it's a power play.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I wrote about this for Salon this morning. Of course, it's a power play, and it was very surprising for the reason that you just sort of indicated. I didn't expect it. I honestly didn't. Everything I saw from the leadership of the Democratic Party was that this is going to be an extremely buttoned-up conservative approach to impeachment, which always struck me as bizarre, since impeachment is anything but that. It's the most political act, really, that the Congress can make. And I'm not talking about partisan political. I'm just saying this is an exercise of power by the U.S. Congress against a sitting president. And that's one reason why it doesn't happen very often. They usually work out their differences before it gets to that point.
And Trump, it's so unprecedented that there's no roadmaps for it. Like there's,
right.
It's like people are saying, like, what Pelosi's doing. Noah Feldman came out the other day, the guy who testified on behalf of the Democrats, saying that this was impeachable. He wrote an op-ed saying, well, impeachment hasn't happened until they deliver these articles of impeachment to the Senate, which is all right, fine. To tell the New York Times to issue a correction on their headline the other day.
No, he hasn't been impeached. And by the way, fine, because I think they should continue with impeachment.
Exactly.
There's a lot more to talk about it with that. So fine. We didn't really impeach him. We're just in the process. And that's fine with me. And I think that Pelosi, this was a surprising move, but it makes perfect sense to me. Yep. I mean, I don't, there's of course, this is what Democrats and what liberals, progressives, all of us on this side deal with, which is the hand-wringing about absolutely everything. Any kind of use of partisan power is that you always get the hand-wringing from me. Oh, my goodness, it doesn't look good, and, she shouldn't do this, and blah, blah, blah. Well, whatever. And I actually am impressed with the fact that Pelosi is saying, talk to the hand. I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't care what the Republicans say. You don't know what you're talking about. And she's just kind of dismissing all of this pearl clutching over what she did. Of course it makes sense. What is happening here, and you and I've talked about this a lot, Sam, on the other show, is that, they are looking at a Senate here that they've got about 6 seats that are potentially flippable to the Democrats in 2020. And what that McConnell is desperate to do is to hold a perfunctory, quick and dirty process that just blah, 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 have a couple of days where some people say some stuff and then they vote, and that's that. And Trump struts around saying he's been totally exonerated, which really isn't the point. What he's trying to do is protect those people from having to take a public vote on something that really looks controversial. Right. Nancy Pelosi got some polling this week that shows that the vast majority of everyone in the country thinks that witnesses should be called for this Senate trial. And logic says, what's he so afraid of? If he had a perfect call, if all this has been fine, then there's no problem. Why don't they have the witnesses? And that included 64% of Republicans. That was not something that Mitch McConnell wanted to deal with. And she saw that, and she and her leadership decided, okay, let's push this. Let's see how far we can get with this. Because McConnell, up until the moment when the trial starts, he has, a tremendous power over the Senate and the process and how that whole thing is going to unfold. Once it starts, he's just another member of the Senate, and everything goes according to a different set of rules than usual. But right now, the power is in Nancy Pelosi's hand, and she's decided to use it to try and force them, knowing that Donald Trump is going to go crazy because he wants his exoneration, right? I mean, he's been impeached, but he hasn't been exonerated, and he is losing it, and you can tell that he is. I mean, he's obviously on a razor's edge. So she's playing this. Now, I don't know how long she's going to carry it out. I don't know what the result will be. Maybe they won't get their witnesses, or maybe it'll be some kind of tepid compromise that doesn't really get them everywhere where they want to be. But showing this power, and I'm telling you, it's long past time for the Democratic Party to recognize that their people need some red meat fed to them every once in a while, too. We're not sitting out here, maybe everybody thinks we eat arugula, but we need our protein. And, every once in a while, they need to give us a little something too, show that we've got some backbone and that we've got a little bit of power on our side. So I'm all for it, and she can hold it out as long as she wants. As far as I'm concerned, I recognize that political, that the political
pressure is going to build, right?
Yeah, may require her to give in before I might want, but I'm very happy with what she did. And by the way, another point that I just want to make quickly. There's a lot of stuff happening right now with this Ukraine stuff. With Rudy Giuliani's out there shooting off his mouth. Lindsey Graham went on TV yesterday and said, basically told him to shut up, saying, if you're going on TV and you're saying this stuff, you better know what you're talking about, right? Because they are very concerned about what Rudy is doing, and with the fact that there is money flowing in from Russia to Lev Parnas, Rudy's accomplice in this whole thing, and Trump is not paying for any of his defense. So you could make the case that maybe the Russians are paying for his defense. Along with that, there's this big scoop in the Washington Post this week about how all these senior officials, by the way, who are still too chicken shit to put their names out there, who say that Trump's been saying from the beginning that Putin's the one who's been telling him in their secret meetings that Ukraine is the ones who interfered in the election in 2016. So, these Republicans don't know what shoe is going to drop. This story is still alive. Whether or not they want to get the impeachment over with, assured in their minds that Pelosi won't do it again.
Right.
But this story, as long as it's sitting out there, there are Ukrainian and Russian shoes dropping all over the place, and anything could happen. They know that. I mean, it probably won't, but you just don't know. It's making them very, very nervous. So that alone is worth it to me. Let them have a little nervous Christmas. I think that's fine.
Well, and
enjoy.
And I would say a couple of things. One is that the longer Pelosi does this, the more damage it does to these Republicans who don't want to take that vote. Because every day it's a news story. It builds this notion of that vote that Susan Collins or that Tom Tillis or that Cory Gardner, the vote they're taking is a controversial one. And, I don't know that people look at the specifics, but, that's the way it sticks in their heads. The other thing I would say, based upon what you've said, is that there's two other points too. Devin Nunes was on TV the other day trying to explain how Lev Parnas called his office and spoke to people at his office. And now he's suggesting that maybe he was talking to Lev Parnas's wife. Now,
oh, that's not good.
well, when you feel like you need to imply that you're having an affair with this guy's wife as a way of saying that I was not in contact with him, that to me suggests that a mild state of panic has set in.
Exactly.
And talk about having a cow. Had to say it. And but yeah, and I think you're right about this. I think like they are worried about this being a live wire, and that's unhealthy to them. All right, let's just say a quick 5 minutes about